Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for being here and for taking the time to listen to my talk. I know that some of you have probably heard my talk before and seen my videos before, my slides before, but hopefully I'll put a little different twist on it, and hopefully it won't be too repetitious for you. So as Joan said, I am the mom of a young adult, well, he's 31 years old now, who I adopted when he was a little guy. And I came upon him as I was an instructor for nursing students, and he was a patient in the hospital. Um, and so what I've titled my talk is Normalizing the New Normal. Now, we've heard this term, new normal, so much ad nauseum, actually, since COVID started. But the reason I used the phrase was because when I brought this child home, it was a new normal for me. I was the mother of a 16-year-old who I had adopted when he was 11, and I was single. And even though I was a nurse and, you know, knew what I was getting myself into, sort of, it was definitely a new normal. So what I want to talk about is how over the years we have navigated the system, how I have worked really hard to normalize Roy's life so that he was able to participate in everything, most everything that other children at different stages of development were able to participate in. And it was important to me that he grow up to be a well-adjusted adult. And so there were times when we had to take some risks. And I'm not encouraging you to put your child in an unsafe situation, but you'll see that there were times when Roy participated in things that maybe the medical community didn't quite agree with, or other people might frown at, but I felt like it was important. So I'm going to move along through some slides to show you some pictures of this guy. And this is a picture of him in the NICU. So he was born with total ganglionosis, or Hirschsprung's, which meant that he didn't have nerve cells in his intestine. And normally it occurs in a very small portion of the large intestine, but his was all the way into the middle of his small intestine. So that meant that his bowel was inert. And he was obstructed. And so after multiple surgeries in the NICU, he was left with a central venous catheter and an ostomy. So this is a picture of him. He was a very smiley baby. I did not know him at this point, but I was able to obtain this picture. So when he was 8 months old, the NICU nurses decided that he should come to the pediatric unit because he was crawling around in the NICU. And that isn't quite the environment to be crawling around. So they transferred him to my floor, and that's when I first met him. So he was 8 months old, and he lived there for 10 more months because his family was not able to learn his care. He just stayed in the hospital. So one day I jokingly said to the social worker, somebody needs to take this baby home. And she said, well, why don't you take him home? And I said, okay. So this picture is the day before he went home. We brought the car seat to the hospital, and we put him in the car, and we drove him around in front of the hospital. And as you can see, he was not a happy passenger. The woman standing with the striped shirt was the child life specialist. A very special lady, and she, excuse me for crying, she was part of the reason why he grew and developed up to this point the way he did, because she knew how to help him play and help him learn. So he cried and cried, and the next day I came to get him. And so that's the social worker behind us. She was also very instrumental in his life. But this is the day he went home from the hospital. He was just a tiny little guy. Here we are in front of our house. My hair was very black then, but raising Roy has done this to me. Anyway, so you can see that he was very tiny. And in fact, he was below the 5th percentile. He weighed 18 pounds at 18 months. So I knew that his TPN, he was on TPN every night, that his TPN was not adequate. And so I contacted UCLA and Dr. Ament's group, and they directed me to Lynn Howard, who we'll talk about in a little bit. Anyway, when I brought him home, he had never eaten in the hospital because back then we didn't realize how important it was to put food into the gut, even though somebody was on TPN. And so when I brought him home, he started eating, and we gave him whatever his little heart desired. And here I think he's eating pasta, which has become one of his mainstays. He loved to eat. This was our first camping trip. So we went to Lake Ontario with a group from our church, and we camped in a little rustic, very rustic cabin. It did, I think, have electricity. If it didn't, I had batteries, and we ran his pump and did so that he was able to participate in all of that. He was pretty cute. Here he is apple picking. We lived in central New York then, and so that's apple country. And here he is eating more than he picked. Of course, most everything he ate came out as ostomy, but he was a pretty happy camper. He loved to eat. So trying to create some independence with this boy, which he was very eager to grasp. This is a picture of him emptying his ostomy bag. And when I took this picture, I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm emptying my ostomy bag." So he still had his bib on, so it must have been in the middle of dinner, which often happened because a lot of what he ate came out in his bag. So there he is, cute as can be. Here he is learning to ride a bike. So people might say, well, you know, he has an ostomy bag and a central line, and what if he falls? Well, we took the chance, and he did learn. That's our friend Ellen, who was also a big part of his life. He did learn to ride a bike. So here is my boy eating what he called green spaghetti. So it's pesto, pasta, and he to this day still loves pasta and pesto. Yeah, stuffing his face. We would go to a restaurant, and there'd be people in the next booth, and they'd say, "Oh my, look how well that child eats." And I would think, if you only knew that most of what he eats comes out his body pretty quickly. But you can see how healthy he looked, and that was because of Dr. Howard's formula. I get very emotional when I talk about her because she saved his life. Her TPN prescription was awesome, and he started to grow really well. In fact, grew so well that she questioned who his parents were, his biological parents, and whether they were big, and they were not. They were very short. And every time I went for a visit, she would say, "Are you sure you know his parents?" And I would say, "Yes, I'm sure I know his parents." But he eventually ended up in the 100th percentile because of her care. So here he is. He went to preschool for 2 years, and then he went to kindergarten. And here he is graduating from kindergarten. At the same time that he went to kindergarten, he showed an amazing talent for the piano. We had a piano, and he would crawl up on the piano bench, and he started playing by ear. And that continued until he was 12, when he learned to read music. So he is, to this day, an amazing musician. So here he is. He went to private school, to a Christian school, but he, you know, he was in class with regular people and regular kids, and he did everything the regular kids did. Had some disasters where his ostomy would leak and cause quite a stir. In fact, one funny story is when he was in kindergarten, his ostomy bag let loose, and it was in his sneakers and everywhere. He was standing in it. And one of the girls said, "Oh, what is that?" And he said, "I have no idea." And that's pretty much been his attitude through life. We're just going to move on, he says. Okay, so how did we help Roy cope with his special needs? Well, one way was we had a buddy doll, and the buddy doll, we took a very fine catheter and we threaded it into a hole in the buddy doll's chest, and we made an ostomy out of, we took a washcloth and we put a rubber band around it and made a little rosette. We colored it red, we cut it, and we glued it onto Buddy's belly. And Buddy had a little ostomy bag on. And here is Buddy, and Roy has his shoes on Buddy. I'm not sure why he did that, but that's his sense of humor. Here he is in a boat, rowing a boat. What if he falls in the water? Dr. Howard would shudder if she knew this. Well, she might even be listening, but we had to take the chance. So a couple extra layers of Tegaderm, an AquaGuard, and a couple shirts, and off you go to row a boat. Okay, here's my boy. I believe this was a recital in 87. No, it wasn't 87. I can't read that date, but anyway, that's pretty much where he spent most of his life, with his hands on the keys. So, love this picture. So this is Dr. Howard, if you don't know, Lynn Howard, and she was his doctor from the time he was 18 months till she retired. So this is at an Oley conference at the picnic, which we used to have at the end, which we can't have this year, but, and we owe a lot to her. So when I brought Roy home from the hospital, the doctors, they didn't know much about home care. Home care was pretty new. And they said, well, you know, he's probably going to die, but you can take him home. And can I feed him? Well, yeah, I guess you could give him something to eat. So once we found Dr. Howard, we had a vision. And when she started discussing with me about, well, we have to worry about his bones, and we have to worry about his teeth, and we have to worry about his muscles, I thought, oh, this lady thinks he's going to live for some time. And so it gave me hope and a vision, and she was concerned about every aspect of his life, past, present, and future. And that was really special. We love her to pieces. So Roy decided he wanted to be in musical theater. So we went to audition for Winnie the Pooh Christmas Tale, and he got the part of Rabbit. And so this was his very first show. Okay, and then he wanted to skate, to rollerblade, and so we covered up his elbows, his knees, his wrists, and his feet, and his head, and he rollerbladed. There was no reason why he couldn't. And then I decided to be the camp nurse at a Bible camp. And so if I was the nurse, then Roy was the camper. And just before we left this particular year, Roy developed a line infection, and he had many of those. And so we decided, well, we'd go anyway, and we will just give antibiotic in this dirty old camp. And so we, you know, maintained asepsis, and he would come to the nurses. You can see how dirty his knees are, and his feet, and his shoes. And he would come to the nurse's hut, and I would run his antibiotic, and then he would go, I'd flush him off, and off he'd go. And so he did everything the kids did at camp, and he slept in the bunk with them. He had a sleeping bag, and he would come and get his bag and put it on his shoulder and go slither into his sleeping bag, and his pump would run all night, and I would just pray it didn't alarm. And then he wanted to play soccer. So this is when he played community soccer for VJAA. And we just made sure his bag was empty. And if it wasn't, he ran in the woods and emptied it. And he played soccer. He actually played varsity soccer as well in high school. So one day we took a trip to San Francisco, and on the way to San Francisco from Sacramento, we realized we forgot, he was infusing, and we forgot his saline and heparin. And so, so we got to San Francisco, and we hailed down a policeman, and he took us to a fire station. And at the fire station, they provided us with some syringes after they figured out that we weren't drug dealers. And we were able to flush him off. And this is the EMTs. They decided to let Roy pretend he was defibrillating them. So that was quite an adventure. Okay, here's Roy at the ocean. This, I guess, was in '94. And that little guy is was another Oley consumer. And Roy and he were trying the ocean out. Now, they didn't go very far, I will assure you, but they did get their legs wet. And this is Roy skiing for the first time. And guess where he was? He was at Killington in Vermont. And my husband provided him with lessons. He had his friends with him, and he was able to ski. And that's how we normalized that. This is a very special girl. This is Alicia Holly. And she's no longer with us, but she also was a consumer, and her parents are very involved in Oley. And she was very special to Roy. So this is the two of them. This is when she graduated from high school, and her graduation was, she couldn't go to her graduation, I think because of the conference. She decided to walk the aisle at the Oley conference, and it was pretty special. This is Roy when he went to the prom with a very beautiful girl. So you can see that he did pretty much everything that other kids do, and participated in spite of having to infuse every night. So when Roy was 13, I was about to be married for the first time. And I decided that it was time. Well, we had started a few years ahead of time to help him learn how to do his own infusion. So I picked September every year because it's always a new beginning with school. I picked September, and every September I would teach him another step in the process of preparing his TPN. So, you know, I would teach him how to draw up the vitamins, and then I would teach him how to inject the vitamins, and then I would teach him how to purge the line, and so on and so forth. And so by the time I was ready to leave town for my honeymoon, he knew how to do his infusion by himself, and he could also care for his ostomy and change his central line dressing. So that was another way that we normalized. He did stay with my sister-in-law, but he was able to care for himself in that situation. I feel like another story I'll tell you is we were at a church picnic once, and someone said to me, people that we loved, our church family especially, were more worried about Roy than I was. And so they were very protective. And so someone came running over, and they're like, "Do you know where Roy is?" And I said, "No, I don't. I think he was probably 8 years old or something." "Well, he's at the top of that pine tree." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "Well, what if he falls?" I said, "Well, I guess his ostomy bag pops. I don't know. He'll be okay." So it was really important that I, again, allowed him to do within reason things that other kids did. When he was in 6th grade, the class went to Ottawa and for an overnight, and I signed up as the nurse so that I could go with him. And his friends, his good friends in class knew about his infusion, and so they would carry his bag for him, or that kind of thing. And so we stayed in a school, and he slept on the floor in the auditorium. He came to my room. I hooked him up, and off he went to sleep with the rest of the guys in the auditorium. So through every step, he would say, "Mom, how are we going to do that?" And I would say, "Well, we'll find a way." We're people of faith, and so we would pray. And I feel like we had divine inspiration some of the time, and we would adapt to whatever we needed to help him achieve his goal. That was very important. This is a picture of a trip that we took. Actually, we were on our way to an Oley conference in Salt Lake City, and we went 5 or 6 days ahead of time, and we toured all the national parks. And Roy was able to hike in all that hot weather. We just, ran more fluid, ran extra fluid, and kept him hydrated. And he was able to join the family and be with us. So having worked with many pediatric patients who have disabilities or other conditions that might preclude what they can do, I've always encouraged parents to focus on what they can do instead of what they can't do, and to look for ways to help the child succeed, even in spite of whatever their limitation is. So that was a real focus in our life, to just make sure that Roy had every opportunity to normalize his life. And he has continued to do that. He learned the lesson well, and he will tell you, if he was here, which he is in another room, he would tell you that that the reason that he grew up so well adjusted was because I never said no. And that's kind of an exaggeration. I did say no at times when it was really unsafe for him, but for the most part, I would try to brainstorm a way around the situation. And I think that was very beneficial, and I think he really appreciated that. I think that trying to think of some other situations where I have a great situation. There was an Oley conference in Minneapolis, I think it was Minneapolis, and where the Mall of the America is, wherever that is. And we went to the amusement park in this mall, and he was infusing during the day that particular week. And so he had his little backpack on, and he was hooked up, little red backpack. And he said, the kids, and Alicia was with him, they were going to go ride a Ferris wheel or something. And they went running off, and I was just sitting on a bench, and he came running back crying. And he said, "The man won't let me on. He says I have to take my bag off." And so that was a situation, that we had to troubleshoot. So I went over and I said to the man, he can't take his bag off. His bag is attached to him. And they did allow him to get on the ride. I'm not sure if it was that same trip, but one of the trips that we took to an Oley conference, Dr. Howard happened to be in the security line with us. And we got to the conveyor belt, and the man said, "You have to take your bag off." And he said, "I can't, it's attached to me." And the man was like, "Well, you have to take it off." And Dr. Howard just stepped right in and said, he said it's attached to him, he can't take it off. And the man, said, "Okay," and let him go through the scanner with the bag on. So we've had lots of interesting experiences through the years, and I wouldn't trade a minute of it. He's grown to be an amazing man, and has made a very valuable contribution to society. And I'm very grateful to have been his mother and his caregiver. And hopefully he's very grateful to be my son, and he will be my caregiver someday. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'll be available for questions later today. And of course, Joan and all the Oley staff have my phone number and my email and everything. If anybody would like to contact me, I'd be really happy to talk and brainstorm with you and help you normalize your new normal. Thank you.